Next game I want to talk about, we're going to talk LSU Texas A&M. And I can copy and paste the same thing I said about the Colorado Utah game for the first half. I can apply that to the second half of this game. Bloodbath does not describe it. When you talk about home invasion, that's a term that Bama especially loves to throw around. We talk about home invasions. This was a home invasion in Death Valley. Last year when Bama visited LSU, it was a tough game for LSU. Bama really put them to the sword. It wasn't a competition. This game felt different. This was a turning point, I think, for LSU, and not in a good way. We'll talk numbers first because I always like to look at the numbers and see how this game plays out on paper. But there's a lot to talk about in this game. We'll look at the box score real quick. A couple of the numbers for Texas A&M first. Marcel Reed, 12 for 21, 202 through the air, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He also led the team in rushing. Had 13 carries for 108 yards and 2 more touchdowns on the ground. Ruben Owens the second, 8 carries, 44 yards. Jamarian Morrow, 3 carries for 26 yards. This Texas A&M team ran it all over LSU. They ended up running for 224 total. That's including that's including sack yardage. So 224 total. Reception yards. Ashton Bethel Roman had 1 catch for 47 yards. He led the team. Casey Concepcion, special player. We'll talk about him in a second. 3 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. Mario Craver, 4 catches for 42. So they went 202 through the air, 224 on the ground, and they scored a special teams touchdown. For LSU, the numbers are not good, to say the least. Garrett Nussmeier, 22 for 35, 168 through the air, 1 touchdown, no picks. So did a good job not turning the ball over there. On the ground, Harlem Berry, 9 carries, 59 yards, 1 touchdown. Caden Durham, 5 rushes, 36 yards. And then Michael Van Buren Jr., backup quarterback, 5 carries for 7 yards. LSU's receiving, Barry Brown, 4 catches for 60 yards. Aaron Anderson, 5 catches for 59. And then Tradez Green, 6 catches for 54 and 1 touchdown. Kyle Parker caught the other touchdown for LSU. He went 3 for 20. This game was not played in a box score. It was not close on the scoreboard, and it was way more of a beatdown than it even showed, 49-25. We'll talk about this game in 2 halves. For LSU, whenever you go into Death Valley, for any team that visits Death Valley, I think that there is an aura around it. There's kind of this mystical feeling, kind of like Bama fans, how we feel with Jordan Hare. There's this thing where just things can go wrong no matter how good you are coming into the year, no matter how bad the home team is. Things can go wrong in this game. They were 21-0 in night games under Brian Kelly. And at the beginning, at halftime, I thought this was going to be one of those games. LSU led at the half. They led 18-14. There was kind of a supernatural factor to this game, for lack of a better term. They blocked a punt that was for a safety. They had 2 interceptions. They had 1 pick that came out of the end zone. It felt like they could drag Texas A&M into deep water in this game and make it a 4-quarter game. And that second half, all the magic was sucked out of that stadium. The better team being Texas A&M, they put a real gap between the two. And this, for me, confirmed 2 things. The first thing was I suspected that, no pun intended, LSU was a bit of a paper tiger. I think they have underperformed all year, especially on offense. I feel like there's a bit of a disarray in that locker room. Kelly's feeling like he's on the outs before this game even started. This was a big game. And I won't paint this as it was a make or break game for Kelly and this team, but it was really close, and it ended very rough. They lost to Vandy last week. First time Vanderbilt's ever been favored in an SEC game. They went out and won. It's been a tough road for LSU up to this point, but this one felt different. Death Valley, like I said, it has an aura about it, and Texas A&M, they went out and they crushed them. They went out and they sucked any magic out of that stadium. And the few LSU fans that were in attendance in the 4th quarter of that game were calling for your head coach to be fired. If that's not a home invasion, I don't know what is. I think if LSU go and they lose a close 4th quarter game, that's one thing. But and A&M's a good team, and we'll talk about them. But I think if you go out there and you lose a game in this manner, I think that expedites the Brian Kelly firing. Now, I don't expect there to be any movement before the Bama game. They have a bye week coming up, so you could see it happen, but I don't expect them to be firing him this week. But if it happened on Monday, it wouldn't surprise me. It's kind of the same thing as Hugh Freeze. Would it surprise me? No. Do I think he's the right fit? No. Do I think management over there thinks he's the right fit? No. And we know what the fans think. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they ended up firing him this week. I don't think it's going to happen. But if it popped up on my newsfeed on Monday, I wouldn't be shocked because I just don't think he's the right fit. And I think everybody around that program knows it at this point. The other confirmation that this gave me was Texas A&M is legit. Now, and when they're at their best, they can play with anyone in the country. I subscribe to the, how can I put it? I subscribe to the camp of if I don't see it, I don't believe it. There's always chatter around Texas A&M every year. And what do they always do? They end up underperforming. They lose a game they shouldn't lose. I look at it the same way I looked at Penn State with James Franklin. It's the haven't done and can't done. There was a long time where Texas A&M couldn't have won the big game. They couldn't make the playoffs. They couldn't win the SEC. They couldn't win a national championship. This time, it's maybe they haven't done it. With Mike Elko and this program, there seems to be a mindset in this camp that we're not going to be the classic Texas A&M that goes and falls at the hurdle they shouldn't fall at, or they lose the big game. They feel like they have a different mentality. And when you look at the skill on the field, when you pair that with an elite mentality, you get a national championship contending team. And that's where they're at. I look at these teams as tiers. We talked about BYU earlier. I say Georgia Tech. They're on that second tier. We can compete for a playoff spot. We think we can make it there, but I just don't know. Everything after that's gravy. When I look at teams like Ohio State, Alabama, and then now this Texas A&M team, they're in the top tier. They're saying we have the team, we have the mentality, we have the personnel, the coaches to compete for a national championship team. And they showed it last night. Did I expect them to perform like that in that moment? No, because I haven't seen it before. I haven't seen Texas A&M go out and put on a performance like that against what is a weakened LSU team, but they made them look like a high school team out there. I felt like in that first half, all the 50-50 balls, everything, all the little quirks were all going LSU's way. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, well, this is the one where Texas A&M, either they fall or they prove everybody wrong. And they didn't just prove everybody wrong by having a fourth quarter win or grinding out and winning in overtime. They went out in that second half and they broke Death Valley. They cracked any kind of aura and magic that place had to the people under the Brian Kelly regime, and they blew it wide open. I think anybody now can look at that game and say, you know what? We can go win there too. When there are times when I think back about what made someone like Nick Saban great at Alabama is you never really had those. They lost bad against Clemson in a national championship game. They never went into home and got just beaten down and blown out. There are plenty of places that are home fortresses, and Death Valley was in the top tier. And now it's a place where LSU plays football. I'm sure they'll show up and show out whenever the team is back at home, but I mean, it felt like something broke in LSU last night that I've never seen before, and I just don't think it's repairable with Brian Kelly. I think you have to get a new regime, and you have to find some new belief, not just for the fans, but for those players, man. Watching Garrett Nussmeier at the end of that game, that dude looked like he was going through it. It was a tough watch if you watch that game, and even if you're not an LSU fan, I just think it was a tough watch in that game. For Texas A&M, they are what I thought South Carolina was going to be. They have a dynamic mobile quarterback who's a good enough passer of the ball, He can get the ball to dynamic, elite wide receivers in the open field. They can break open the game. They win in special teams. I mean, that Concepcion kick return was phenomenal. That dude is a player and a half. If I'm an NFL guy, if I'm looking at drafts, he's on right up there in the top of my list of guys who can bust the game wide open. On top of that, with an offense that can win in a shootout, you have a defense that put LSU in a blender last night. I remember a few years ago when Bama played LSU, and it was Zach Mettenberger, and man, when that dude came out, he was crawling, literally crawling off the field at the end of that football game. That's what it felt like last night. This Texas A&M team, this Texas A&M defense, Nussmeier is going to see them in his nightmares for the rest of the year. 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. Nussmeier got pulled with 6 minutes to go. I thought he should have been pulled before that even. This game was over long before that clock hit 000. I thought that Brian Kelly should have pulled him even earlier. I think he went a drive too long. Luckily, he didn't get hit again. He's clearly not healthy. And I think just putting him out there, I think he said in the postgame to leave him out there any longer would have been malpractice. I thought it was malpractice leaving him out there as long as you did. That game was over for a long time. So I think for LSU, or let me finish talking about Texas A&M. I think that this team can go win a national championship if they continue to play the way they have. Like I've said, there are times in the past where Texas A&M goes out and they underperform, but with this regime under Mike Elko, they look legit. They have an elite mentality. They have a great offense. They have a defense that can pop like they did last night, especially against teams that aren't up to snuff. If you have a team that can go out there and they can find out the weaklings, they can go out there and they can have a good game against a team that is generally considered to be okay, and they can make them look less than average, that's a good football team. And Texas A&M had a point to make last night, and they made it. So congrats to them. They look like a legitimate title contender, and I see them going to the SEC championship game. We'll talk about their schedule coming up here in a second. I think for LSU, if you, for those of you old enough, if you have a magic 8 ball and you shook it up and you said, what is LSU's identity and what is their future going forward? If you remember the responses on there, it says, response hazy, try again. And that's how it feels for LSU right now. Because right now they don't have an identity. They don't have an offense. Their defense is good enough in the same way that Ole Miss's defense is good enough, but that offense is miles behind where they should be. And for a guy like Brian Kelly, the reason I give him so much airtime and so much flack is when I think about moments against Florida, you get 5 interceptions from your elite defense, and your offense goes and puts up 20 points anyway. You scored 26 in this game. You scored 25 in this game. If it was good enough against Florida, why is it not good enough now? This offense hasn't been good enough all year. I almost started a new segment saying it's just called, did LSU score more than 20 this week? They did, but they still got beat by 3 scores. So whenever your defense is playing against a good offense and your offense is exactly what we've seen all year long, there's nothing new there. There's nothing new in that offense that we haven't seen so far. I don't know what you expect. And he took responsibility and said it, but I mean, it's too little too late at this point. I think for LSU and Brian Kelly, there's going to be a clear split there, whether it's at the end of the season or whether it's in the middle of the year. But the fans are sick of it. A lot of people didn't think it was a great fit at the time when they hired him, and it's proven to be so. So as far as games going forward, they have Bama after a bye week. Then they have Arkansas, Western Kentucky, Oklahoma to end the season. And then when you look at someone like Texas A&M, they have a pretty favorable schedule at the end of the season. They have Missouri, who just ended up losing their starting quarterback. They play South Carolina at home, so it's not in Columbus, so that's good for them. And then they play Samford and then Texas to end the year. So they're in very good stead. These are 2 teams that are sitting on the opposite ends of the spectrum right now. One team is at the end of its life cycle as far as head coaching and regime changes go. And then you have Texas A&M, who's in the full ascendancy. new time under Mike Elko, and they're playing great football. So good for South Carolina. Good for South Carolina. Good for Texas A&M.